Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. I'm Marco D'Angelo, joined in studio with Matthew Holt, VP of Player Development at CG Technologies. Matt, we're here, leg 2 of the Triple Crown, the Kentucky Derby. First off, how was the handle for you guys that day? Every place I was at was packed for the Kentucky Derby, which is for the one and only horse race we get everybody playing. But how were your numbers?
Pretty good. So I think we did just over, I think it was like 2.6 million, which is great, especially in horse racing where you're guaranteed a certain percentage ahead of time. So the handle was great. All our books were packed. And with the favorite winning for the 4 straight race, suddenly these Triple Crown hopes are alive. So we're hoping for some good crowds this weekend.
Yeah, and speaking of that Triple Crown being alive, obviously every year going to the Preakness, we have a Triple Crown threat because we haven't run the second leg. And I want to talk to you, there's a bet that's out there every year before the Kentucky Derby. It's a simple bet, yes or no, will there be a Triple Crown winner? Now, that opened up mostly around town before the Kentucky Derby. The no was -900. And as you know, I did a lot of shows and everything, and I don't like laying big chalk, but I said I don't see a Triple Crown winner in this year's crop. Now, after the Preakness, they adjusted that.
You mean after the Derby?
After the Derby, excuse me, heading into the Preakness, they adjusted that, and it came out at -500, and we have seen it drop around town. You said you guys have it at what, -360?
Yeah, we're down to -360, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, look, we got a Triple Crown winner a couple years ago at Nyquist, and now with the favorite winning the Derby, that always promotes more hope that you could actually have a Triple Crown winner. And then look, this horse looks like he's the deserved favorite here, probably in this race. And, the race kind of sets up where you would think, hey, the 2 big late bomb closers will skip this one, come back in the Belmont where it suits their running style better. Not the case, is both Gunnevera and Lookin' at Lee in this race here. So there won't be any rest advantage for either of those two, off the cloud closers in the Belmont. So I think people are starting to get behind this horse as maybe our next Triple Crown winner.
I don't see it. And I actually did a show yesterday, and that's when it was still at -500. I thought there's value on the no now. If we go back, and we're going to talk about as we break down some of these horses, Always Dreaming, yes, it was a fantastic race, but you couldn't have drawn up a more perfect trip than he got for the Kentucky Derby. Broke out of the gate clean, where we're going to talk about other horses. There were so many horses that had troubled starts. He didn't. He was able to get right to the rail, and he sat second just off the flank of the horse State of Honor that was, the pace setter. And then as they got to the half-mile pole, jockey moves him out from the rail just to the outside of State of Honor so he would have a clear path whenever he wanted to make his move. Well, he didn't have to do that because when State of Honor packed it in, he packed it in. It looked like he was going in reverse, and he inherited an uncontested lead. Only had to hold off Irish War Cry, Battle of Midway, which he did, and then the late charge from my horse, Lookin' at Lee. He was only off the rail for a short period of time.
Yeah, and look, there was a serious bias that day to the rail. Obviously, too, that rail lane was running a lot faster than the outside, and a lot of the horses that you mentioned had troubled trips that maybe could have been contenders in this race. When they did finally break free and were able to make runs, they were stuck in the outside, which might as well have been quicksand at Churchill Downs that Saturday, and they really couldn't catch up. I mean, everything's set up perfect for this horse, but I think this race in the Preakness probably sets up really well for him, too, at least on paper. And then when you just do the math on the -360, he's -120 right now here to win the Preakness. What's he going to be in the Belmont if he wins the Preakness? Even money? So if you took an even money and a -120 and parlayed it, you still wouldn't even get +360. So I understand the hesitation, and I'm with you. Look, I didn't think there was a Triple Crown horse in this field. I still don't believe it'll get done, but all of a sudden the math is actually in this horse's favor a little bit, and I think that's why we're seeing some action on him.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the horses, and obviously, Anybody that's followed me on Twitter for the last 2 weeks knows that I hit the Kentucky Derby pretty hard, and the horse that did it was Looking at Lee, and obviously that horse has a soft spot in my heart, finishing second. But I'm going to be the first one to tell you he got the second best trip of all the horses in the Kentucky Derby, and it's one of those things, and it's a benefit, and we mentioned it when we talked about it. He had the jockey that knows Churchill Downs, and Corey Lannery was smart enough to know the rail was the place to be, and he never left it, and whenever he started his move, it's one thing to say, okay, stay at the rail, but then you still have traffic problems, horses coming back to you. Well, nobody else wanted to be down at the rail other than the horse that was winning the race, Always Dreaming. So when he started his move, it was a clear sailing the whole way around the racetrack, never had to check his horse, and got the easy second. I don't think he gets a second in this race.
No, I don't either. And if you're looking to beat the favorite in this race, I think there's only two shots, and that's Classic Empire first and maybe Gunnevera. Everyone says, oh, Gunnevera, you know, in the slop, and he's a way out closer, and he's lost to Always Dreaming before already. But this horse was still running even at the end, but he was so far wide in that quicksand that he still couldn't really make up any ground. Still went from 13th to 7th at the finish, and Classic Empire bumped at the start, bumped around twice, all kinds of traffic issues, still rallied to come in fourth. You know, a lot less horses in this race. He has the 5-hole, where Always Dreaming has the 4. They're going to be right next to each other. I think this race really sets up for a duel here between Always Dreaming and Classic Empire, and if they go a little bit too fast at the beginning, watch for Gunnevera running late.
Yeah, and I'll mention one thing on Gunnevera. One of the things that a lot of people like to do in handicapping, and I agree with it, it is a good indicator, but I'm going to dispel it in this instance. Gunnevera's jockey jumped off of Gunnevera. He's taking another mount in this race. And normally, if that's a handicapping sign that the other horse is a better horse. But in this instance, Gunnevera's trainer is not the size, doesn't have the size of stable in horses and powerhouse horses that Chad Brown has. And I think this is more of Castellano being loyal to Chad Brown rather than thinking that horse is better than Gunnevera. It's for future down the road in getting mounts.
I agree. And look, Chad Brown's going to pay his bills all year long running on that circuit where, you know, he's only going to make so much money in this one race. So I'm with you. I think, you know, JJ Javier, you know, everyone calls him JJ Javier, I think is making the right move and staying loyal to his trainer. But I still like the jockey on the horse, and I think he sets up fine. Look, is there going to be pace up front? That's the whole thing about this race. With Classic Empire, if he decides to go early and Always Dreaming goes early and we get a pace up front, then it's going to set up for Looking at Lee, Gunnevera, maybe Hence. But the problem is in the Derby, they didn't get a pace, and on paper, I'm not sure this race is going to have a lot of pace either, and that kind of is going to be prohibitive to those, you know, big from the clouds closers, and there's a few of them here.
There is, and where I think that the draw is going to help us get the pace, Conquest Mo Money drew the 10 post, and I think he has to leave, and I actually think it's going to be Always Dreaming and Conquest Mo Money on the front end, and Classic Empire just right behind them, on their flank, so that they'll be within touch, because Classic Empire didn't want to get away as far back as he did in the Derby. Yeah. He got just leveled coming out of the gate when all of the horses out of the auxiliary gate came down inside and created a chain reaction. Him and McCracken just, collided with one another. And most horses, that would be it. That would take them out of the race, where he gathered himself, got away 13th, and then was able to make the rally, and then got hit again in, coming down the stretch when he was starting a move, gathered himself a second time, and then rallied. And a horse that's had as many problems as Classic Empire, and when I say problems, misbehaving in races and so forth, to get hit twice and still show the professionalism to finish fourth, I got to say, and we'll be talking a lot more about him in the next video. A couple last things I'm going to throw out to you, some tidbits on the Preakness. This is the truest race of the Triple Crown. And what we've had here is 12 of the last 15 Preakness winners have returned under 4-to-1 payout. So you are getting, you're not seeing the bombers, jump in here like you've seen in, Kentucky Derbies and in the Belmont. In the last 30 years, a stat, and this is one that, doesn't bode well for all the new shooters, but in the last 30 years of the Preakness, there have only been 3 Preakness winners that did not race in the Kentucky Derby. So history going against horses like Conquest Mo Money and Cloud Computing. And the last thing, and as you said, the track bias that Saturday in Louisville, Kentucky was definitely on the inside. All of the horses on the outside, I think, had a tremendous disadvantage. As you quoted, looked like they were running in quicksand. So I think we're seeing a fast track on Saturday at Pimlico. I think that's going to even the scoreboard a little bit for those horses that didn't make the closes, and gives them a license to show up and be better. And that's your Henses, your Guinevere's, all of those horses that had troubled trips.
Yeah, and I think, look, because of the short price you're going to see, my estimated price at post time here is probably 3 to 5 on Always Dreaming. I think that's a fair number. I think because of the favorite being such a low number here, you're going to be able to get value in what I think is actually a more wide open race than it may look like on paper. Guinevere looking at Lee, Classic Empire. The idea of getting Classic Empire at 4 or 5 to 1 in a race with only 10 horses when he was almost the same price in a race with 20 horses, very appealing.
All right, well, be sure to check into our next video because we're going to actually break it down with our best bets. You'll find out who Matt likes on top and who I like on top. Something tells me we might land on the same horse. That's in the next video. Be sure to check that out. And don't forget, every Friday at WagerTalk, it's Flashback Friday. You can get a play for just $7. Normally these plays sell for $20 or $30, but you can pick up any play on Friday for just $7. We do it each and every Friday. Check it out at WagerTalk.com. We'll be back with more.